WowGo Knight introduces a couple of interesting incremental improvements to budget and mid-tier electric skateboards. And while this board isn't necessarily an upgrade to the WowGo 3X, I personally enjoy using the Knight more than the 3X, and I'll explain why. Let's go through every part of this board, starting with the speed controller. The ESC, or Electronic Speed Controller, is where the WowGo Knight has the biggest improvements over the 3X and some of its direct competitors. It is a Hobbywing ESC, so it has the same smooth and accurate control that you would expect from Hobbywing. But unlike most other boards that use Hobbywing, WowGo Knight has the standby feature, which they introduced in the WowGo AT2. The standby feature lets you turn the board on or off using just the remote. This by itself is a really useful improvement, but as a side benefit, it also removes the issue where boards that use Hobbywing ESCs automatically engage the brakes when you turn off the remote. On the Knight, when you turn off the remote, the board goes into standby mode, and the drive wheels roll freely. The other major upgrade to this ESC is that it is now, supposedly, compatible with most electric skateboard motors. This means that with the same ESC, you can use hub motors, belt drive motors, or direct drive motors, and you don't have to get them from WowGo. But if you are going to use motors from a third party, I suggest that you double check with WowGo to make sure that they're compatible. Apparently, X-Way's motors are not compatible, but most other brands are, according to WowGo. Suppose you have a different board that has a terrible ESC and a finicky remote that you have to constantly recalibrate. Instead of swapping that ESC to a VESC-based ESC, which might be overkill for some, you now have another option. That's assuming that WowGo will sell this ESC as a standalone product, because why not? And I'm also assuming that it'll be priced competitively, but we'll just have to wait and see. As far as I can tell, the remote is the same as the remote on the WowGo 3 and 3X. It uses a single control wheel for both acceleration and braking, and a single button for multiple features like changing speed modes, changing to reverse, etc. The remote's display shows you battery indicators for the board and the remote, your current speed mode, and distance traveled. You'll also use the remote to select the unit of measure and input proper numbers for the drive system. When you order a WowGo Knight, you can choose either the standard battery or the plus battery. The standard battery is 180 watt-hours, made up of Samsung 25R cells in a 10S2P arrangement. The plus battery is 288 watt-hours and uses Samsung 40T cells, also in 10S2P. You should get about 60% more range on the plus battery, maybe even a little bit more. But the plus battery option costs $150 more, so you'll have to decide for yourself if that added range is worth the price. To see how to estimate range based on battery specs and your weight, visit dquan.com. Besides battery options, you can also choose between hub motors or belt drive motors. The belt drive option costs $60 more. In this case, this is a no-brainer. Go for the belt drive option unless you have a specific need for hub motors. I have a video that explains the differences between hub motors and belt drive motors. Look in the description. So for the WowGo Knight, the least expensive configuration would be the standard battery with hub motors at $500. And the most expensive option would be the plus battery with belt drive motors at $710. According to WowGo, both the acceleration and brakes on the WowGo Knight should be a little bit stronger than the WowGo 3 and 3X. That's probably true, but I personally didn't notice a difference. These things are hard to notice without comparing two boards side by side, so don't expect a night and day difference. The performance is on par with the top electric longboards in the same price range, and the now defunct boosted boards. With the stock wheels, the top speed is 39 km per hour or 24 miles per hour. That's also about the same as most other electric longboards today. Now let's look into the longboard parts of the board, starting with the deck. The deck on the WowGo Knight is relatively stiff compared to the WowGo 3 and 3X, but it still flexes, which means it should still absorb some road vibration. but it's not the type of deck where you'll be using its flex to pump while carving. While I enjoy both flexy and stiff decks, if I had to choose only one, I would prefer a stiff deck. It's just my personal preference, so I totally don't mind that the Knight is more stiff than the 3X. I would, however, prefer more concave. The deck has a really shallow concave, much like the WowGo 3 and 3X. There's a hole in the deck for the handle, which I don't think makes a notable difference in this deck's performance, but it does help with portability, which I'll talk about later. Instead of using the Paris V2 for the front truck, like on the WowGo 3 and 3X, the Knight uses WowGo's new in-house truck. Aesthetically, the design is a little bit different from the Paris V2, but the performance is basically the same. The bushing seat, rake, pivot pin, distance from the kingpin to the pivot, they're all pretty much the same as the Paris V2. The only noteworthy difference is that WowGo's truck uses a 45-degree base plate instead of 50-degree, making it more stable for higher speeds. On the belt drive version, the rear truck is the same as the Paris-inspired rear trucks on the WowGo 3 and 3X, but with a 45-degree base plate, again for improved stability. On the hub motor version, the rear truck uses WowGo's in-house design, same as the front truck. The stock bushings are 95A barrels, all 4 of them. 95A is normally pretty hard for me at 69 kilograms, and they did make sharp turns at low speeds kind of difficult on this board. But at higher speeds, they feel okay. In any case, bushings are easy to change. These trucks come with 1/4-inch risers that stick out a bit to double as bash guards to protect your deck. Pretty cool, and they seem to have become standard on WowGo's electric longboards. On the belt drive version, the stock wheels are a soft 78A, 90mm in diameter, 62mm wide. They use the ABEC cloned core, so you can use any wheels that use this type of core, such as the 105mm cloud wheels. At this moment, WowGo doesn't have Kegel pulleys, but I'm told they should have them by the end of October. On the hub motor version, the wheels are also 90mm in diameter, but the rear wheels use PU sleeves. I'm told they are interchangeable with the hub motor sleeves from Backfire and X-Way. The battery enclosure has improved water resistance compared to WowGo's previous boards. The enclosure now has a cover on the inside, and the cables have also been improved. I'm not sure if the foam pads are even necessary anymore, but a little bit of extra protection doesn't hurt. I would still recommend against riding in wet conditions, because any wheels you use on this board are going to be slippery and unpredictable to some degree. Water also damages the wooden deck over time and can cause parts to rust. And also, riding in the rain is simply a miserable experience. The Knight is 7.8 kilograms or 17 pounds. That's about average weight for this type of board. Having a handle in this deck definitely makes carrying this board easier, but I wish the edges weren't so sharp. Using this handle without gloves can be uncomfortable. This board actually looks better in person than in the photos, especially the bottom side. But on top, this grip tape design looks like it was chosen from a crowdsourced design contest. The handle, even though it's useful, makes this board look cheap, like a budget board from 2017. I'm not saying that handles always look bad. You can design a handle that's not just a hole in the deck, just like how you can design a battery enclosure that's not just a bento box. I can nitpick about a bunch of other stuff, but overall, I guess it looks alright. The least expensive WowGo Knight configuration is about $500, which is on the upper end of the lowest priced budget boards. If you're new to e-skating and want to start with an affordable board that you can upgrade later, this board may be one of the best options because it lets you upgrade to belt drive motors without having to buy a new ESC. I don't think any other $500 board today lets you do that. You can also swap the battery to the higher capacity battery later on, and keep the standard battery as a spare. The two batteries use the same enclosure, so you don't have to drill new holes in the deck. For those looking in the $700 price range, the WowGo Knight differentiates itself by having a not-so-flexible deck with a shallow concave, which some people may prefer. This is also the only deck in this price range that has a handle. making it arguably the most convenient $700 board to carry. And finally, this board may be good for people who want a relatively stiff deck with Paris or Paris-like trucks. I happen to like this configuration, and I had a blast trying out this board. In its default setup, I feel that this board is good for medium to high-speed carving. What do you think about this board? Got any questions? Leave a comment down below.